When nature had finished shaping the valley of the copper, she had left over certain of her material. And so in genial mood, from the copper matrix of the hills, she carved a chalice, its sides of the molten green, its bowl of the vivid blue of malachite. Into this she poured the liquid crystal of the skies, and then, raising it to her lips, drank to the immensity of her own handiwork. Afterwards, she set the flagon in a niche of rock at the valley entrance, and there all that pass that way may see the emblem of her artistry. Nestled inside the Chugach National Forest, sitting in a glacially scoured valley, surrounded by 3 mountain ranges towering at heights between 2,100 to 3,500 feet. It is here we find a freshwater body, Eyak Lake. Its shape has been compared to a 3-armed starfish. The north arm is Eyak Lake's main contributor, being glacially fed by an 11-mile-long Power Creek. It all begins at Shepherd Glacier at an elevation of 1,500 feet. Traveling this broad glacial valley for 4.5 miles, flows then enter into a steep canyon with gravel to boulder substrate, through Surprise Valley, and over the 52-foot Omen Falls. Omen Falls is located 2 miles upstream of Eyak Lake. It is said to have been caused by an ancient landslide that created a 2-square-mile, 1,100-foot-high fan-like ridge damming Power Creek. A large lake formed and rapidly filled with glacial sediment, until nature's dam was finally breached and water cut out what is now called Omen Falls. Eventually, a half-mile upstream from the entrance to Eyak Lake, Power Creek emerges into a 1.5-mile-wide delta, providing spawning habitat for a large percentage of Eyak River spawning runs. When the flowery flows reach Eyak Lake's north arm, the glacial silt makes for a beautiful sight, as it is pushed down Eyak Lake's prominent channels, cut 1.5 feet to 12 feet deeper than the surrounding bottom. Flows travel southeast, searching for the lake's sole drainage point. This is the lake's second arm, called Eyak Gap. In the Gulf of Alaska, storms normally circulate counterclockwise. That brings traveling weather and winds over the Copper River Delta through Eyak Gap. Here winds come in and water flows out. Things were different before 1964. Eyak Lake was intertidal and accessed by boat. Some fishermen had boathouses, while others rented space from Charles Allen on the dike off Nirvana Park, tying up to a log. Mark King remembers the boat races from Cordova Harbor to Eyak Lake, accompanied with 55-gallon drums of clam chowder and floating swim docks. The earthquake of 1964 ended these good old days by raising the lake 6 feet, trading the dike's boat parking for float planes. After the earthquake of 1964, a sheet pile weir was constructed at the Eyak River outlet at an elevation of 17.5 feet, maintaining the lake's average depth of 8 feet. This weir drains 40.5 square miles of Eyak Lake down Eyak River into the Copper River Delta. 20.5 square miles drains from the Power Creek Basin alone, making the other 20 square miles contributed from 40 additional streams around the lake, dominated by rainfall and snowmelt, peaking in September and October, leading us to the lake's third arm, the west arm. Pointing towards Orca Inlet in the city of Cordova, the west arm is Eyak Lake's most developed wing. As stated in a 2002 U.S. Forest Service study, Eyak Lake lies in a glacially scoured valley. The low-lying area between Eyak Lake and Orca Inlet consists of up to 140 feet of unconsolidated fluvial glacial deposits of sand, clay, and glacial till. This is probably an end moraine from a more recent glacial advance. Eyak River is the lake's sole draining source. It is a low-gradient, meandering channel, easy for flows to back up. Problems arise when flooding reaches developed lands. It may be damage to your home, to our roads, and to the lake. If we are to live by the lake, flooding is a concern. With human involvement and development comes responsibility, and that is usually of water quality. But more on that later. Our protagonist, in all of her complexities and beauty, is followed by the agonist, the human, who marvels at nature's artistry, yet struggles to understand their role in the duet. No people were at Eyak, nor were there people at Alleganic. From way upriver it was the people. They boated down in those cottonwood-like canoes. Down the Copper River it was they boated. They were becoming populous, those first ones who boated down. They never boated back upriver. They didn't boat back there. Those behind them boated down in another fleet. Another group boated down. Thus there were people at Eyak. Thence Eyak. In those it was, they boated around into Eyak Lake. Those cottonwood, then, the spruce, they tried that next. That turned out to be another good thing. Big canoes. They made them anew from spruce. Thus they were at Eyak. They boated back upstream to Eyak Lake. They boated back upstream. That Eyak area, it pleased them. They settled down there. There they made some more canoes. Then they boated to Eyak Lake, and many fish. Ripe reddened salmon, they saw them. Thus they didn't boat around any more. They settled right there. They remained living there, and then their children. Thus came to be many of them. The Eyaks kept having children at Eyak. Thus we became many at Eyak. Thus we are Eyak people at Eyak. They, when they felt like it, then to the mouth of the river, to the breakers at the river mouth to get seals. Yonder at where they had boated down from, there were no seals, neither were there very many the salmon that might swim up thither. They boated down, and they found out about that. Everything. Seals, ripe reddened salmon, these cockles, these eggs, they saw them, these birds, geese, mallards. Thus this Eyak became a home. Mountain Slough too, though. They were becoming populous, and at the Mountain Slough, for its part, it became another village. Cordova. Cordova was not a village. It was at Eyak Lake, that was a village. Already now white people arrived there, and then Cordova. Cordova became a town. Eyaks thither. Eyaks, there aren't very many anymore. They lived at Cordova. From Eyak it was, they moved thither. They moved to Cordova, and nevertheless, at Eyak Lake, some of them would boat back to Eyak. They would live some more back at Eyak, not in one place. There came to be these white people, and we settled at Cordova, in town. In town we lived. People thus settled. It was not until 1889 that Europeans entered the Cordova Copper River Delta area, when 4 canneries were established in the Eyak country, 2 on Wingham Island in Controller Bay, and 2 on Eyak Lake. The Eyaks that survived moved closer to the canneries and formed what is known as Old Town, or Eyak. Although trams and docks were built on Eyak Lake to transport fish, fish didn't build Cordova. Copper did. A copper stake dug right into the dream of an Irishman. Michael Heaney left Ontario at the age of 14 for life on the railroad. In 1900, he found himself in Skagway building the White Pass and Yukon Railroad. With his same passion for the impossible, after reading a 1905 interview with Daniel Guggenheim on the need for rail to transport the richest copper deposits ever found overlooking Kennecott Glacier, While Guggenheim and the late J.P. Morgan placed millions into routes from Valdez and then Cantella, it was Heaney who in 1904 began on his own responsibility, aided with capital by London financiers, to build 196 miles of rail across Eyak Lake, over the Copper River Flats, at the meeting of two glaciers, to the Copper River's junction with Chitna River. The Copper River Northwestern Railways was built in 1911 for $20 million. From 1906 to 1911, 6,000 men worked building the railroad, while many came to Cordova to support that industry. Still in service is Ambrosia Pizza, Alaska Hotel and Bar, and Cordova's Chiropractic Clinic, just to name a few. At this time, promoters were calling Cordova Frisco of the North. Yet by 1938, the mines were closed, and so did Cordova. But many stayed. The population count in 1938 was 1,232, primarily fishermen and cannery workers. One man was quoted when asked why he stayed. "When the tide was out, the table was set here. You had clams, you had crab, you had halibut, and you had salmon. You had ducks and geese. This is subsistence." In 1845, the railroad was replaced with a road. In the mid-60s, a ferry system connected Cordova to the world, and the third mode of transportation became a passion for many Cordovans. On May 7, 1929, Clayton Scott flew the first aircraft into Cordova. It certainly was not to be the last. By 1934, Cordova constructed its own airfield on Eyak Lake. Kirk Kirkpatrick began Cordova Air Service, and the list of pilots continue. Humans are by no means the sole inhabitants to Eyak Lake. The Eyak Lake AMSA Cooperative Management Plan detailed 210 bird species within a 10 nautical mile radius of Eyak Lake, and 33 mammals close to its own shoreline. Of its many resources, the most enduring have been the riches of the sea. There used to be a saying that Cordova's greatest export is fish, and its greatest import is fishermen. Aquatic life of Eyak Lake alone includes 10 species of fish. The sockeye, the lake's most abundant resource, is recorded to have over 75,000 square yards of potential beach spawning gravels located on the alluvial fans of inlet streams, which provide cool, oxygenated environments for developing eggs. The 1985 AMSA Cooperative Management Report showed aerial surveys of 463 to 28,000 sockeye in Eyak Lake at one time. 16% of the spawners are found in Hatchery Creek or Power Creek, 8% in stream deltas, and 76% on the lake shoreline. Rearing is primarily offshore in Eyak Lake, where zooplankton is plentiful. Coho salmon, also known for their color as silvers, run up Eyak River to spawn in Hatchery Creek and Power Creek. In 1985, the professional fishery consultants surveyed an estimated 150 to 9,200 spawning coho in Eyak Lake at one time. Rearing juveniles spend time in these creeks and along the lake's shoreline, foraging for insects and snails. The professional fishery consultants also documented cutthroat trout spawners, or reds of spawners, in 9 tributary streams around the lake, while the Dolly Varden spawning populations chose several inlet streams. Both anadromous Dolly Vartons and cutthroat trout were found to have overwintered and reared in the deep waters of Eyak Lake. It is salmon, the species that author David Montgomery calls the king of fish, who interests the hearts, the economy, the palate, and the culture of Cordova. The Latin name, derived from salire, to leap, is a species 20 million years old. Restoration activities for this tasty fish are reported as early as 1030 AD, when Scottish King Malcolm II closed the season from the end of August to mid-November. When the Magna Carta was signed by King John, it provided that the King's Weir be dismantled to protect salmon for the public good. And in 1712, Queen Anne placed regulated fishing on the Thames River, followed by George I outlawing any obstructing weirs or dams. Yet by 1868, all 17 rivers that Anne and George tried to protect were blocked by dams or poisoned by pollution. Salmon were casualties of the Industrial Revolution. By 1960, extinction of salmon followed in Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and Switzerland, and they were seriously impaired in France, Portugal, Spain, Denmark, Finland, and the Baltic states. The United States faced a similar fate of its European neighbors by legal overfishing, poaching, proliferation of stream obstructions, pollution of water quality, and degrading of fish habitat. In 1871, Congress established the Commission of Fish and Fisheries to determine the declining runs. As far as Alaska, the first cannery was not built until 1878, and then in 1889, decline was feared. The first regulations were placed in the territory, outlawing any obstructions to stream, appointing federal agents to manage the fishery, and to set up the first Alaska hatchery on Kodiak Island. The responsibility for salmon abundance was held with the federal government until the late 1890s, when government hatcheries were abandoned and cannery-operated hatcheries, wanting to protect their own stream and futures, flourished. This empowered the government in 1900 to make it mandatory for any person, company, or corporation taking salmon in Alaskan waters to produce sockeye fry 4 times the number of mature salmon taken each year. By 1902, the number was changed 10 to 1. After many failed operations, in 1906 the mandatory hatchery law was eliminated and a new rebate system, 40 cents for every 1,000 fry released, was enacted with biannual efficiency inspections. In 1917, the Alaska State Legislature set aside $80,000 for the Territorial Fish Commission, who had just moved operations from Juneau to Ketchikan to build 2 new hatcheries, one in Seward and the other Eyak Lake. In June 1921, A.J. Sprague guided construction of not only a new hatchery, but also roads, rails, bunkhouses, outdoor troughs, and a 1,400-foot pipeline to create a rearing pond. The first year, 12 million Chinook eggs were received from Juneau, but because the egg baskets had not arrived, once the eggs were eyed, half the eggs were buried into Powder Creek and half into Spring Creek. Sprague was fired by December 1921 for frivolous spending on the hatchery. Edwin Wentworth succeeded in 1922 to plant 3 million sockeye-eyed eggs at the head of Eyak Lake. In 1923, a new hatchery building was erected, and methods became more sophisticated. Now able to rear fry, Wentworth released 3.8 million sockeye fry in January 1924. The hatchery attempted the same process the following year, however floods in August liberated the 3.2 million fry. In the egg take of 1925, 7.3 million were released early by November. Funds had run out, with high expenses for heating, lighting, payroll, and running a predator control weir that destroyed trout and Dolly Varden from entering the lake. By 1926, the bunkhouse had burned down, and by 27, the U.S. Forest Service took ownership of that old hatchery building. Soon the old hatchery building became the Bethany Home for Children in 38, and today all that remains is an old wooden bridge and the remains of the water pipes. So we know restoration work is not new to the world, and likewise not to Eyak Lake. In 1981, the Alaska Coastal Policy Council recommended to the city of Cordova that Eyak Lake be designated an area meriting special attention. In this recommendation, a cooperative plan was commissioned by professional fishery consultants. Authors Dick Groff and Ralph Purtle compiled years of data into this 1985 cooperative management plan, which data in this film has been based upon, and can be viewed from the Copper River Watershed's website under Eyak Lake. The goal of this plan was to develop objectives, policies, and actions to maintain and/or improve water quality of Eyak Lake, maintain and/or improve the fishery production of Eyak Lake, maintain and/or improve the wildlife habitat values associated with Eyak Lake, accommodate existing and appropriate future residential, commercial, and facility development within the planning area, and develop and maintain recreational opportunities and maintain the scenic value. And scenic it is. Improving fishery production is important not only for the sake of an amazing aquatic species, although beautifully entertaining creatures. It is for the people of Cordova that production remains important. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game, in a 2003 FinFish report, have estimated that Eyak Lake provides an annual ex-vessel value of approximately $1 million, making Eyak Lake a $1 million lake. From 1996 to 2000, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game estimated an annual sports catch of 1,099 sockeye and 4,788 coho adults in Eyak River. Being one of the most popular sport fisheries in the Prince William Sound, tourism brings to Cordova industry for charters, local pilots, hotels, dining, and local retail. And subsistence. Putting away salmon for the long winter. Freeze it, dry it, smoke it, or can it. Salmon is a staple on most dinner plates, bringing generosity of food and cheer. Data from the 1985 AMSA Cooperative Management Plan, compiled on this map, highlights the habitat locations around Eyak Lake. The top right, showing Power Creek and Hatchery Creek, is a habitat for pink salmon, coho salmon, sockeye salmon, cutthroat trout, and Dolly Varden. The purple and brown sections highlight coho and sockeye rearing grounds. While the hot pink color concentrates on sockeye spawning beds, totaling over 75,000 square yards. This map also features water quality concerns, shown by the circles of green. Hydrocarbons were found only within the west wing, at the stormwater outfall at Nirvana Park. The Cordova community has made great strides in preventing heavy metal contamination and fecal coliform overloads in Eyak Lake since 1985. And so we continue to monitor and improve water quality, fishery production, and wildlife habitats for generations to come. When looking at a watershed, we must ask, what did nature create and what did man create? Those are the questions asked when looking at the impact human development has on an ecosystem. In 1958, the shores of Eyak Lake hosted two roads, the Copper River Highway and Power Creek Road, but little in the way of homes nor industry looked to occupy its riparian zones. By 1974, industry and residents developed Lefevre and what is now the McLaughlin Trailer Park, as well were some upland areas being cleared for development. In 1986, the upland areas had houses, Elmer Point was being clear-cut, and more homes were found on Eyak Lake's shoreline. More in 1993, 96, and today. So why monitor development? What does development have to do with fish habitat? Well, for a watershed that receives 167 inches of precipitation and 80 inches of snowfall each year, stormwater runoff is a major concern. Every activity on land, whether it's major construction, a 3-month oil change, or simply washing your car, every activity is directly affected by rainfall runoff, down the storm drains, and into your local watershed. Development means clearing of stream bank vegetation. This destabilizes the soil and contributes to the lake a sediment load. Sediment can reduce the amount of sunlight reaching aquatic plants, clog fish gills, smother aquatic habitat and spawning areas, and impede navigation. But not all sediment is the same. Glacial flour, the sediment that makes glacial streams milky in color, is created when the weight of glaciers grind rock into fine powder. It is extremely fine. It doesn't clog gills or irritate eyes and scales, unlike the larger sediment from runoff and erosion. Vegetation is needed not only to stabilize bank soil. Overhanging vegetation creates microhabitats for salmon by cooling water 7 to 12 degrees cooler than the stream sections exposed to the sun. And the plant detritus is food for insects that are then food for fish. So what does a healthy riparian habitat look like? It is infiltration of water into the upland and riparian soil so that subsurface water flows may upwell, oxygenating lake water and fish habitat. It is protecting our lake shoreline by offering it a 300-foot vegetation buffer, 50 feet to stabilize soil and food web, 75 feet to moderate water temperature, 125 feet for nutrient removal, 150 feet for sediment control, 200 feet for flood, and 300 feet for Eyak Lake's diverse wildlife. Currently, the city of Cordova mandates a 20-foot vegetation buffer. It's raining, it's pouring, the storm drains are filling. But with what? Did you know that 1 quart of motor oil can contaminate 250,000 gallons of water? Washing your car? Ever wonder where all the oil, soap, and cleaners drain? And true, roads, driveways, and sidewalks are dangerous without a little bit of sand. Only, are we managing it responsibly? It rains, it pours, and it drains into our watershed. The Nirvana Eyak Lake watershed, approximately 59 acres, is a concern for chemical, sediment, and hydrocarbon pollution. 2 of the 3 culverts are outflow culverts that drains the low-lying area around the 2 trailer courts between Lake and Chase Streets and the north portion of Lake Street to Nirvana Park. The Eyak Lake AMSA Cooperative Management Plan has identified these areas as rearing and overwintering habitat for juvenile salmon. Anecdotal evidence suggests that spawning of sockeye is observed in this area. There are a number of alternatives that exist, including a hydrodynamic separator, a retention pond, bioswale, etc. So what of culverts? The development of roads means construction of culverts. whether for draining rainfall or for providing for fish passage. The quality of each culvert is very important to Eyak Lake's fish. Things to consider are the size, the design, water velocity, and does it have a natural bottom. A failed culvert blocks fish passage, while a successful one encourages it. Like the Powder Creek Road box culvert the Copper River Watershed Project installed June 2008, it is reported coho, pinks, and cutthroat trout have returned this summer. So if it's not draining an anadromous stream, does the culvert quality really matter? The answer is yes. Size matters for flooding, and the position matters in that it is not perched. Flows from perched culverts drain on top of the ice, eliminating natural upwelling and the creation of dissolved oxygen for fish habitat. On Powder Creek Road, how many culverts would you guess are along the 5-mile unpaved portion? 12, 25, 53, 107. That's right. So it is important that we find ways to accommodate existing and appropriate future residential, commercial, and facility development within the planning area. And also that we develop and maintain recreational opportunities and maintain the scenic value of Eyak Lake. In July 2004, the Eyak Lake Restoration Team assembled, partnering the Copper River Watershed Project, ADF&G, U.S. Forest Service, NVE, EcoTrust, CDFU, Eyak Preservation Council, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Prince William Sound Science Center, DOT, Prince William Soundkeepers, City of Cordova, and local fishermen and residents. This was the beginning, and now, the $1 Million Grant for the $1 Million Lake. Since salmon are the true currency of our community, their biological health directly translates into our region's economic sustainability. So it's fitting, through the ARRA Economic Stimulus Funds, NOAA has granted the Copper River Watershed Project $1 million to perform 5 major restoration projects along Eyak Lake. The first, the public boat ramp. Also on the Copper River Watershed projects to do is updating the 1985 AMSA Cooperative Management Plan, measuring acres of spawning habitat, updating the bathymetric map with GPS data, create awareness with 5 interpretive signs around Eyak Lake, campaign for water quality, don't run off salmon, and to work with the Eyak Lake planning team to propose recommendations to increase protection for the lake's riparian zones and fish habitat. Fishing is our culture, and the Copper River Delta is our watershed. In all the lakes in our watershed, Eyak Lake is the only one in city limits. It is a gem we must respect.